This is good culture.
What is good culture? Well, I'm going to explain, but let me first tell a story. Okay, a little story about how I grew up. When my father stopped playing football, or better yet, when he got cut, ouch, we moved to Southern California, where he and my mom were from. And this is where a lot of my formation came from. I grew up loving film, loving music, loving movies, loving the arts. And a lot of that is because of my mom and my aunt and my older brother. And so my aunt worked on TV sets like 227, most of Nell Carter stuff. If you're not familiar, then you're too young, but look them up. Great TV shows. My brother, Jabu, who's on my album, my new album, and the song's Shadow of Shame.
How could this happen to me? The prodigal son, no clue, Pops was waiting.
He introduced me to hip hop, and that to me was just revolutionary. I was like, wow. My father actually took me to see Do the Right Thing when I was 10 years old. And I will say that I would not recommend that you take a 10-year-old to see that movie, or that you show your 10-year-old that movie. It did a lot of things to me and for me. Some I won't talk about right now, but it made me fall in love with storytelling. Spike was an early hero for me at a young age. But my mom introduced me to the Harlem Renaissance. And when Black History Month would come around, because obviously during that time, the only time you can talk about Black people were during Black History Month, she would say, you're not doing a report on MLK. You're not going to do a report on Rosa Parks. You're going to do something, or a report on people that no one's ever heard of. And so I remember at a young age doing a report on Hannibal. And I remember doing one on Langston Hughes, and she introduced me to the Harlem Renaissance. And that's kind of like where I fell in love with poetry. But then my older brother, Reggie, introduced me to hip hop and wanted me to start rapping. And then also realized the girls like rappers more than they like poets. And that was it. That was night for poetry. So anyway, that was somewhat of the formative years of my life. I just wanted to tell stories, whether it was through film, whether it was through literature, because I love writing at a young age, or whether it was through music. Fast forward many years later, I become a Christian because my other brother, Dahadi, and he introduced me to the cross movement. I'm going to be speeding through this story, but the cross movement had a wonderful, indelible impact on my life as well. They showed me this revolutionary concept that you can love Jesus, but yet and still be, I guess you can say, tethered to the culture in a way that was redemptive. And that to me was quite revolutionary, because the only thing that I saw close to that was Kirk Franklin. And so here I am, this young dude wrestling with what does it mean to be a creative, love Jesus. But the one thing that I was still struggling with was this formation that I got as a young Black man who loved Black literature, Black, I guess you can say, intellectualism, and had a heart for justice because of my mom.
Surely she will be Miss Donna, made some dope kids. The Lord gave her great gifts.
Anyway, here I am, this young man who's wrestling with these identities that seem to be in conflict with one another, because I believe this false narrative that they couldn't exist. And so Christianity at that point in my life, which I know now to be a lie, was this pristine faith that felt like if I delved too much into creativity, then I would be stained by the darkness of that world. If I read too many sociologists or individuals who are Black and historical, then I wouldn't be someone who was tethered to a true or real gospel. But then I was awakened by this reality that a lot of the individuals that I was diving into, that I was kind of being reintroduced to because I went to Tuskegee University, that folks like George Washington Carver loved the Lord. Folks like Phyllis Wheatley loved the Lord. Folks like Booker T. Washington. And then I got introduced to pastors and leaders and thinkers who oftentimes, like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, these are individuals who rarely get extolled for their faith and often are just seen as freedom fighters. But I soon realized that I come from a tradition of people who didn't detach their faith from their justice or their creativity. And so that created something in me. And that led me to this concept of, oh, these people were participating in good culture or good culture making. And I guess you can say it expanded my understanding of the gospel. Because oftentimes when we think about the gospel, we think about, oh, the gospel is just a relationship with God. And yes, it is. It's very much a relationship with God, but it's so much bigger than just a relationship. As my brother Dahadi says, it's about relationships. And I like to think that it's about 4 major relationships. You can add more or whatever, but when we think about the gospel, oftentimes people only start preaching like the gospel is relevant in the New Testament, and so you ask people, are you a sinner, blah, blah, and you share the gospel through that way. But I think when you do that, you often run the risk of getting people to only reform their behavior and not getting them to see their true identity. When you start the gospel in Genesis, you see that God creates us for a relationship with him, and that you see we are formed, our truest identity, our truest nature is to have a relationship with the maker of the cosmos. But not only just the maker of the cosmos, he also creates us to have a proper relationship with ourselves, a wonderful intrapersonal relationship that is submitted unto him. But we also see that we are created to have fellowship with one another because God creates so much and he says it's good, but then he says it's not good for us to be alone. And so fellowship and community is highly important. But then there's this 4th relationship that I think is quite deficient in our theological teachings and foundations, is this concept that God creates us to create and to cultivate. And so if these relationships with God, with ourselves, with others, and with creation and how we work are an idea of who we are and who we are in Jesus, then I think there's something to say about how we work. Because oftentimes in Christian spaces, when the word work comes up, it's seen as a punishment for the fall. Like this is a consequence of sin. Like,
the truth is, if you're unhappy at work, you're probably unhappy in life.
But we have to realize that God instituted work before the fall. And so therefore, before there was ever sin. And so the activity that we participate in is an act of worship. The work is worship. Now, we don't make work worship, but the very activities that we participate in is a reflection of who God is. It's us, I guess you can say, demonstrating in our best abilities a reflection or the attributes of God. But of course we sin, and there's a corruption, an inversion in all those relationships. So there's an inversion in our relationship with God, and a corruption in the way we view ourselves, corruption in how we treat one another and how we relate to one another, but definitely in how we work. We no longer work to bless other people. We work for our own benefit. We practice greed. We have colonizers' hearts, and we see this with Satan giving the noble lie to Eve in the sense that God is just jealous that he doesn't want you to become your full self. But God instituted as much dignity, more dignity and grace than we needed, but we wanted more.
Does your God have a boss? Does your God have a cross? Does he tell you more, and never count the cost?
But Jesus does a wonderful thing, and not only just redeeming our relationship with God, but redeeming all of those relationships, relationship with ourselves, with others, and how we work and how we cultivate. And so therefore, what does it look like to be people who are trying to be folks of good culture? What I want us to do is to understand that the garden is past. And I've talked about this before, but we are not returning to the Garden of Eden. That is a time that was beautiful, but we can't create utopia. So when we think about the gospel redeeming and reforming things, it's not to create a utopia. I think Jesus gives us the roadmap. Some will say the social imaginary to exist in a world that's corrupt, to exist in a world that's falling, to exist when you have no power, but yet to lay your life down, to love your enemy, to be somebody who's gracious and charitable, to heal people, to exist in the midst of chaos and dysfunction, but yet show what it's like to lay your life down for the benefit of other people. And this is a picture of another garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, where his friends fall asleep, where our flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing, where we're told to watch and pray, where Judas sells him out, yet and still, after though all of this is happening, Jesus shows us what it looks like to exist in a world with power without having, I guess you can say, institutional power. And I think it's beautiful. There's this quote, Sister Ening. She says, Jesus is arrested and refused to defend himself at his hearing. He is unjustly sentenced and crucified. He forgives his accusers. He yields to his executioner. He dies. His authoritative power, so expertly wielded elsewhere, is completely restrained. When faced with this visceral manifestation of human depravity, Jesus allows it to annihilate him. He prays in that same garden. He says, Lord, don't take them away from all of these things. They're going to be, as she says, they're going to be unjustly accused. They may be arrested. They may be crucified. They'll have accusers. He says, don't take them out of this world, but protect them from the evil one. Give them the ability to sustain and endure and to live well. And I think this is what it means to produce good culture. My pastor, Deuce William Branch, member of the Cross Movement, says that in culture, we are proclaimers and not enforcers. And today, there are a lot of people who are trying to enforce Christianity on folks. But I think the beauty of the gospel is that you win people not by winning, but by losing your life. But there's an even beautiful, or let me say this, there's an even more beautiful, better yet, picture of a garden that is to come. And that's the third garden. That's the New Jerusalem, where Jesus will redeem all things, where all things will be made new, and where those things that are corrupted will no longer entangle us, where there will be perfect peace. The things that we are told to participate in will be fully realized. Well, we won't need faith because we will behold him. We won't need, I guess you can say, healing because we will be healed. But we will still have love because love will be emanating from the king on the throne.
Now that's my king. Well, do you know him? Do you know him? Hey!
All that to say, that's what we're trying to produce. That's what I'm trying to produce. A community of people who want to say, what does it look like for me to love God, to love myself, to love others, but to love my work, and not just for my own benefit, but for the benefit of other people. There's this book called The Prophet, and Khalil Gibran, who writes about this prophet who visits the village, and in the village, the people are asking him questions. They want him to wax poetic about love, about family, but he starts to talk about work. And he has this statement. He says, work is love made visible. And that's what we are at, I guess you could say, good culture. We want to make our art, our thought, and our advocacy to be love made visible to the world. And so good culture is basically a collective of individuals who are artists, academics, and advocates. I love alliteration. So you think about those threes. And I'm not saying that this is not for pastors. If you're an artist and if you're a pastor and you love to advocate, then this is for you. But the areas of expertise that the individuals that I'm bringing around good culture are folks who love the creative space, who love academia, and who love to advocate for folks. And these are the spaces in which they exist. I found, to go back to my story, when I became a Christian, all the men and women that I had in high regard, like people I actually can touch, like who existed around me, were campus ministers, missionaries, or pastors. And so for a short period of time in my life, when I was a college student and I had just become a Christian, I said, well, I guess this is what Christians do. They become Christians and they work in ministry. But I had this struggle because, as I told you before, I knew that I had this heart that was leaning towards the arts. And I said, man, is it sinful?
See, Daddy, sinners have soul too.
For Christians to exist in the market space? And it took me a while to get to a place to have a robust, or even, I think, a healthy theology of work, a theology of creativity. And so what I want to do is to produce that for other people, folks who are stumbling through the dark and wondering, what does it mean to be a Christian and to love to think deeply in the academic spaces? What does it mean to be a Christian, to love the arts, but I don't want to be stained by the darkness of arts, if you will? What does it mean to be a Christian and love advocacy? Because these are the things that I think have formed me as I've been on stages, as I've been on the streets as an advocate, and as I've been in classrooms as a professor. And so we at Good Culture, we want to be a community of individuals. And so soon we'll be rolling out our actual community where people can come together, pontificate about deep things, share ideas, engage in the resources that we will create, like master classes, from our podcast, which is you're listening to right now, to our cohorts, our resources, and our community. We want to be a resource and a tool for you as individuals who are trying to figure out, what does it mean to produce good culture? What does it mean to exist in the Garden of Gethsemane, but yet not lose hope, and to see that Jesus will come one day, and he's calling me to be a conduit of his grace and his goodness right now.
This is Good Culture.
This particular podcast is going to be a place where we'll have conversations, we'll have interviews, but there'll also be creative offerings.
Oh, yo, sign me up. Sign me up. Sign me up. You won't forget it.
So Good Culture is trying to be a space that holds to the fidelity of Jesus, while at the same time allows you to be your sanctified you. Because sometimes you, like, just trying to be you, we need you to be the sanctified you, the you that trusts in Jesus, that gives himself over or herself over to the sanctifying work of Jesus, and realize, oh, okay, I got some mess that needs to be cleaned. But we want you in your mess at Good Culture. So join us, do good, and be joyous. Thank you for listening to the Good Culture Show. We hope our conversation sparks something in you. And since you've made it this far, you might as well share, subscribe, and leave a review. Stay connected as we curate, create, and commentate. You can watch episodes on YouTube at Sho Baraka Show. You can also learn more about Good Culture at goodcultureinstitute.com. Until next time, be joyful and do good.
Good Culture.